I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service, and welcome to the Alaska Weather Show on this Monday, May 9th, 2022. And if you'd like to pass along any interesting observations or photos, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. Let's get right into the headlines. The flood warnings have been canceled at Manly Hot Springs on the Tanana River and at Sleep Mute on the Kuskokwim River. We had some significant flooding occur early this weekend at Manly Hot Springs along the Tanana River when an ice jam suddenly developed and caused the water to back up into town, impacting nearly 90% of the dwellings there in Manly Hot Springs. The flood watch that was issued for Circle has also been canceled there on the Yukon River. Still watching some of the broken ice coming down from Eagle. That'll take a few days to work its way through Circle, but at this time, forecasters don't think it will cause any major problems. But anyone on any of the interior rivers, keep an eye on things because river levels are going to stay high and ice jam flooding is still possible. We're not out of the woods yet. Good news is some cooler midweek weather will slow down the snow melt, which will not then tend to exacerbate any of the flood threat. That's some good news here for the next few days. But here are some shots taken aloft by the Alaska State Troopers here over the weekend on Saturday, May 7th. Sometime late Friday night to early Saturday morning, an ice jam formed. And as I mentioned, 90% of Manly Hot Springs experienced some aspect from the effects from this flood. Fortunately, on Sunday, the ice jam broke up and allowed the river to flow again. But nevertheless, there's been damage and a state disaster declaration has happened, so hopefully those of you there in Manly Hot Springs can gradually recover here in the coming days and weeks. And looking at the Alaska breakup map, as I mentioned, the flood warning for Manly Hot Springs has been taken down. This is fresh off the press before this map could be updated. Same thing for the flood watch there at Circle on the Yukon River and the flood warning for Sleep Mute there on the Kuskokwim. What I wanted to show you, though, is there's still a lot of ice there on the central and northern rivers, especially the Yukon River in the interior, and the northern river systems still have a lot of ice. There is more in the way of open water now on the upper Yukon as it gets into the Yukon territory. And we also see the Tanana River having more in the way of some open water there. Kuskokwim still has some areas of ice that need to break up and move along. So again, anybody along any of the interior rivers, please be vigilant and keep a close eye on water levels and ice jams that might form rather quickly. So what do we need from you? We need your help. Spotter reports, pictures, videos. You can submit these to the River Forecast Center at nws.ar, aprfc@noaa.gov. If an emergency, if something really significant develops, say you have an ice jam that forms and it's water's really quickly backing up behind it and it's threatening an area, you can call 1-800-847-1739 to speak with a River Forecast Center forecaster who can take your information. But just a reminder here for preparedness for the river breakup season, stay safe and be proactive. Move and safeguard your property before high water and the ice breaks up. Have extra food, batteries, any type of medical supplies that you need on hand in case you do get cut off for a time. Know your community safety plan and emergency shelter location because these ice jams form quickly and within hours conditions can change rather suddenly. So know what to do in case your location gets flooded. And certainly stay out of floodwaters and ice flows. They can be very dangerous. Well, I want to pass along thank you for those of you who showed up at the 25th Great Alaska Aviation Gathering in Palmer this past weekend. I was out there on Sunday with some of the aviation weather, the unit weather crew there to man a National Weather Service booth, and we had a chance to meet and greet a number of pilots and viewers of the Alaska Weather Show. We're going to be out in Valdez this coming weekend, May 13th through the 15th. I'll be at the National Weather Service booth on Saturday and Sunday, the 14th and the 15th. So please stop by and say hello if you're going to be out in Valdez this coming weekend. Otherwise, on the satellite imagery, you can see kind of a curl in the clouds there between Fairbanks and Kotzebue. There's a mid and upper level low pressure system that's dropping southeastward toward the northern Gulf. That energy is just going to kind of help vitalize low pressure over the north central Gulf here as we go into the day on Tuesday. And then further west, there is a trough that's going to be coming into the northwest coast, bringing a round of some wind and snow showers and a little colder temperatures there across the Seward Peninsula and up through the northwest coast as we go through the day tomorrow. There's a big area of high pressure sitting out through the lower Bering Sea, and that has some warmer air aloft with it. Unfortunately, though, it's not going to, well, good news is it's not going to make it up into the interior because this northwesterly flow and this upper level trough is keeping the colder air in place over the interior of this through the midweek, and that's just going to slow the river snowmelt situation. That's good news because if we had a sudden warm up with really high temperatures, that would allow a lot more water, snowmelt water, to enter the river systems, and that's not going to happen now. If you're in the Panhandle, you had a great weekend. It hit 60 for the first time in Juneau, 66 Sunday afternoon in Skagway. You're going to see the clouds roll back in later tonight and on Tuesday with some rain showers in response to that upper level energy spinning up low pressure, strengthening it a bit there over the northern Gulf, and that'll just keep inclement weather going there across the Panhandle Tuesday, lingering into Wednesday with some lighter showers. Snow in the higher elevations there of the southeast, and also back toward the west and northwest, we have a trough coming in off the lower Chukchi Sea that's going to bring wind and snow and rain showers there along areas of the west and northwest coast. Kind of raw conditions there, even though we are getting further into spring. And we see that trough pushing inland on Wednesday, keeping cloud cover, scattered light rain, and snow showers going across much of the interior, especially along the Yukon Valley and the Alaska Range. In fact, as much as 10 inches of snow was reported at the Ellison Visitor Center in Denali National Park as of this afternoon due to this first system coming on in. So definitely still some winter weather to report. And looking at temperatures as we go through Tuesday morning, generally near 40 in the Panhandle, generally above freezing along the south central coast there, northern Gulf Coast. Interior could see some temperatures dip below freezing. 40s with a cloud cover and light rain showers in through the Panhandle on Tuesday afternoon. Generally 40s to just a bit above 50 across south central areas. Wednesday morning, a bit more in the way of cloud cover will keep many temperatures there, south central areas just above freezing. Panhandle generally mid to maybe upper 30s, and temperatures Wednesday afternoon might be just a couple few degrees warmer, getting back up above 50 in a number of locations, with the exception of the immediate coastline or up in the higher elevations of the coastal mountains and the Alaska Range. Off to the north, we have temperatures teens and lower 20s, North Slope, Brooks Range, a bit below freezing along the Yukon River. Cooler temperatures, though, and then compared to the past couple of weeks, 40s there across the Yukon River Valley, only near freezing Seward Peninsula. And Wednesday morning lows teens and lower 20s there, especially eastern half of the North Slope and Brooks Range. A bit below freezing in the Yukon Valley, and then temperatures Wednesday afternoon still mainly in the 40s, though it could squeak out 52 there at Fort Yukon and the Yukon Flats. Tuesday morning across the interior could be a bit below freezing there, Kuskokwim and Yukon basins, a bit above freezing as you extend out along the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. Tuesday afternoon, we're looking at mainly 40s across the interior there along the Kuskokwim River Basin, 30s on the outer coast, lower Yukon Delta, and lows Wednesday morning should generally be near or above freezing across much of the southwest and extending out in through the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian chain. Wednesday afternoon highs will be confined mainly to the 40s there across the southwest interior, maybe around 50 or so at Dillingham and King Salmon, and 38-ish or so at Nome, so somewhat cool. And looking ahead, the Climate Prediction Center 6 to 10 day temperature outlook for May 15th through the 19th is calling for temperatures to average below normal, especially across the central and interior along the eastern Alcan border in through the Panhandle, with temperatures maybe a little above normal there in the southwest at Bethel and Dillingham down toward Kodiak. And precipitation is expected to average a bit below normal there in the southwest, centered on Dillingham and Kodiak. with maybe a little above normal precipitation along the spine and north of the Brooks Range through the North Slope and Arctic coast. Otherwise, much of the central interior, including the Panhandle, is expected to average near normal precipitation. So at least through in the meantime here, through the rest of this week, we do anticipate cooler temperatures, especially across the mainland.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
It's aviation weather time, and I want to thank everyone who stopped by out in Palmer for the great Alaska Aviation Gathering this past weekend. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I will be in Valdez for the Valdez Fly-In and Air Show coming up this weekend. I'll be there on Saturday and Sunday, May 14th and 15th, with one of my fellow forecasters from out of the Aviation Weather Unit, so we look forward to meeting and greeting with you if you're able to make it out there. Otherwise, flying weather for Tuesday morning, we expect IFR conditions along the Arctic coast, areas central North Slope, and also down along especially the north and western side of the Alaska Range. We have a trough of low pressure in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, helping energy pushing into the northern Gulf will help sustain and surface low pressure in the northeastern Gulf as we go through Tuesday afternoon. A trough coming in off the Russian coast and lower Chukchi will also spread IFR conditions there from around Point Lay south into the Seward Peninsula. And then by Wednesday morning, we expect IFR conditions to expand inland across the northwest and west central areas up toward the middle Yukon Valley. Meanwhile, ridge of high pressure will be building over the lower Bering Sea, the ridge axis extending up through the central and western Aleutians as a dome of warmer air that extends upward will be situated there over the lower half of the Bering here through midweek. Otherwise, Wednesday afternoon, we expect rather widespread IFR conditions from areas of the central Yukon Valley from the south central side of the Brooks Range down through the central Yukon Valley to the west and northern side of the Alaska Range. Anaktuvuk Pass will start out with some morning IFR conditions there just north of the north entrance. Otherwise, we expect MVFR conditions throughout the pass on Tuesday with VFR conditions there as you fly south of the south entrance. Same thing for Atigun Pass. Some morning IFR as you get up there toward the north slope and north of the north entrance. Otherwise, MVFR conditions are anticipated through Atigun Pass with VFR conditions as you fly further south of the south entrance. Lake Clark and Merrill, MVFR conditions becoming VFR during the day on Tuesday. Same thing for Rainy Pass as we round up there through the western and northwestern part of the Alaska Range. Windy Pass should generally hold on to MVFR conditions, so there could be some morning IFR conditions as you fly there northwest of the north entrance. Isabel Pass, generally MVFR conditions are anticipated on Tuesday, as we also expect that further east at Mentasta Pass, though there could be some morning IFR conditions there just on the south side of the south entrance. And Tanita Pass, VFR conditions, though there could be a pocket of MVFR conditions developed there up along just east of the east entrance around midday. And Portage Pass should be able to hold on to VFR conditions during the day Tuesday with MVFR conditions anticipated there along the north end of the Panhandle up there at Chilkoot and White. Looking at freezing levels, we have a broad trough of low pressure in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere reflecting cooler temperatures. As a result, the surface freezing line runs along the northern Gulf Coast, not surprising there, but the freezing levels aloft have been pushed well south through the Gulf into the North Pacific. But notice to the west, the bump, the upward dome of warmer air in excess of 8,000 feet there through the lower Bering north of the western and central Aleutians, a reflection of that mid and upper level ridge. And then there is a threat of icing between 4,000 and 12,000 feet, especially along the outer coastal areas of the Panhandle in association with that low pressure that'll be over the northeastern Gulf. And then a trough of low pressure moving in through the lower Chukchi Sea and Bering Strait could produce some considerable moderate icing between 2,000 and 9,000 feet there along areas of the Seward Peninsula and up toward Point Lay in the lower Chukchi Sea. Upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet, low pressure there over the northeastern Gulf, backside of it, 120 knot max over Kodiak Island. Coming down to mid-levels, we see that vertically stacked system, low pressure there in northeastern Gulf, high pressure centered there north of the central Aleutians with the anticyclonic flow around it. North winds across the Alaska Peninsula to 50 knots at 9,000 feet, and then bringing it down to 3,000 feet. Low pressure circulation still in the northeastern Gulf with the high north of the central Aleutians. Broad 45-knot westerly winds coming in onshore there through the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula, northwest coast, and on the backside of the low in the Gulf, we have northerly winds 35 to 40 knots. That'll translate to turbulence surface to 6,000 feet over the southwest, including Kodiak Island. And then pockets of turbulence surface to 4,000 feet there, north side of St. Lawrence, as well as out into portions of the central Aleutians.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. And joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We really appreciate it, as always.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks. And, we're going to ask you some more satellite questions here, but,
Okay.
Since you're a regular guest, we're going to give you a riddle this time, kind of a trick start to the show.
Okay.
How do you see a polar bear in a snowstorm?
Sounds like a challenging question because
Okay.
the polar bear is white and the snowstorm's white.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Well, in the world of satellite meteorology, you couldn't, because the spatial resolution of this instrument that we're going to talk about today has 375 meters resolution, and even the most well-fed polar bear will not be 375 meters across.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to run into such a
No, that'd be a
creature,
bad day.
would you? In the satellite meteorology world, the equivalent would be, how do you tell the difference between clouds and then an area that has no clouds but's covered by snow,
Right.
a piece of ocean that has no clouds but has sea ice? All three of these are white. The snow, the clouds, the sea ice, it's all white. So how, using satellite data, can you tell someone where the clouds are and where the clear areas are? This is important for aviators. Mariners want to know, in the ocean there, this white stuff, is that sea ice or is that just a cloud? How do we tell the difference? And it turns out, if you look, say, at a picture of Alaska from the springtime, March or April, and it's high noon, so we're getting a lot of sunshine. If you were riding on a satellite with your human eye, look down, everything's white.
Right.
And we've got a picture of Alaska from early April, and we're seeing some of the lower elevations in south central Alaska are melting out, getting some brown ground there, but otherwise there's a whole lot of white on the image. What areas are cloudy, but what areas are clear and covered by snow or ice? It turns out that if we leave the visible spectrum behind a little bit, see, a satellite has multiple channels in the electromagnetic spectrum that it can look at. Part of that's visible light, what we see as humans, but there's a lot going on at other wavelengths. If we add in something that's called near infrared, what we couldn't quite see, but we're getting into that infrared territory, there's a magical property that we can exploit.
Secrets to find.
Oh yeah. This is actually powerful and almost magical, that at a slightly longer wavelength, when the sun shines down on Alaska and then it bounces off back to the satellite, at that near infrared wavelength, it turns out that snow and ice will absorb that wavelength, but liquid water, like liquid droplets in a cloud, will reflect it back. And that's not the way it works in visible. Visible, it just bounces off of all those targets the same. But at near infrared, snow and ice absorbs it, and the liquid will reflect it back. Liquid cloud droplets will do that. And so an image where everything looks white suddenly becomes colorful. And the way this recipe works is that the clouds look pink, and the snow-covered ground and the ice-covered ocean look blue. Suddenly now, we're able to see the polar bear in the snowstorm. We're able to see where the clouds are and where the snow is and where the ice is. This is a powerful advantage. Consider the case zooming into the Bering Strait area. What if you were asked to brief a pilot who wanted to fly, say, from Kotzebue down to Savunga or Gamble and had to fly VFR, visual flight rules, so they had to stay out of the clouds? Could you use a satellite image where everything is white to provide that pilot any guidance?
It'd be pretty tricky.
Very tricky. And that's why we have to go to this other recipe where the all-white polar bear in the snowstorm becomes more colorful. And now we can tell the pilot, aha, this is a cloud you want to stay out of, but over here, sure, it looks white in the visible spectrum, but what we're doing, we'll show you, oh, this is just snow-covered ground, but it's clear, so you can fly right through there, visual flight rules. Same thing for a mariner who might want to get down to St. Lawrence Island, say, but has to avoid the sea ice. This product has applicability there as well.
Wonderful.
It's it's an amazing new technology, so many new channels. The satellite that makes this imagery actually has 22 different channels that it looks at.
22 secret decoder rings.
22 secret decoder rings.
Okay. You know, I liken this to an activity I had in the car when I was growing up. We go on long car rides, and we do all the work in these activity books to, you know, stay calm, cool, and collected for our parents who are trying to get us across the state. But to get the answer, the real answer, you had to apply that red sheet to see the answer or the secret path or whatever the message was in that activity book to get you onto the next page. And it's also like a photography filter, right? If you're taking a lot of pictures, you can apply different colors to see different parts of that image. I mean, that sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
Oh, you know it. The information is in there all along. We just have to combine the channels in a way to reveal what's in there. And by the way, you're dating yourself. So you didn't have an iPad in the back of the car?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, we have, lastly, for dessert, there's a great image of the same kind of recipe. We're looking at South Central Alaska the first week of January. In first week of January, the sun, even at noon, is really low on the horizon, barely up. And in this image, the fun thing is the shadow of Denali. We can see the shadow of Denali over a lower pink cloud deck.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And Denali at 20,000 feet casts a big shadow. So this is another, just for fun, kind of application here. This is called multispectral satellite imagery, and it's the future. And happily, the future is now.
Oh, that is fascinating. And 22 different secrets that can be revealed from just one satellite tool that's floating overhead. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again. We can't wait to have you back and telling us more secrets of satellite technology that are passing over us every single day, many times a day, over Alaska and helping us all the way in many different parts of our lives. So thanks so much for joining us again.
Well, happy to be here.
All right. And thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with a little more weather here in just a few minutes. And of course, we'll have more Alaska weather facts anytime online.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
We'll wrap up the show with a marine weather segment, looking at the sea ice edge. It's continuing to retreat and melt there throughout the Bering. Be careful there with the shore-fast ice as it's unstable and could easily break off. Just keep that in mind. Exert that safety when you're out. Along the Arctic coast, as we go further north, there's still plenty of ice in place along the northwest and Arctic coast. As we get down to the lower Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait southward, we see more in the way of planias and areas of ice that have broken up and allowed for some openings. And with the push of colder air coming back in across the lower Chukchi Sea, this may kind of slow any melting, at least that far north. But south of the Bering Strait, melting will continue, maybe not quite at the rate that we had seen before. The lower Bering, we have a ridge of high pressure that's going to allow for warmer temperatures there in the Aleutians, but no ice to speak of anymore down as it had been around St. Paul just a few weeks ago. But looking at what we have for winds across the southeast channels, the inner channels, south to southeast winds 15 knots, waves 2-3 feet. Outer coast through the Gulf, winds will be out of the southwest to south, turning more easterly as there is going to be a low center there in the northeastern Gulf, just south-southwest of Yakutat. Winds 15 to 20 knots, waves generally 7 to 10 feet at best. Wednesday, winds turn a little more variable there through the inner channels, around 10 knots with waves running a couple of feet. But on the outer Gulf Coast, winds will become more, say, north-northwesterly, 15 to 20 knots, especially as you get up north there of Craig on up through Yakutat, waves running 5 to 7 feet. Now for the northwestern Gulf, we'll see the strongest winds there at the entrance of Cook Inlet, northwesterly to 40-knot gales, waves as high as 12 to 14 feet. Winds otherwise north-northwest, Prince William Sound, and the upper stretches there of the Cook Inlet, and waves 3 feet in Prince William Sound. Forgot to throw this in, but want to just mention with those stronger northwesterly winds, we expect some of the Katmai volcanic ash to be resuspended by those stronger northwest winds, especially in the vicinity of Karluk and AKwx there on the west side of Kodiak Island. By Wednesday, winds come down northwesterly there out of Cook Inlet at the entrance at 25 knots, waves 6 feet. Otherwise, winds southerly there at Prince William Sound, 15 knots. Southwesterly winds there, upper Cook Inlet, especially Kenai up toward Anchorage, waves running about 3 feet. And then On Tuesday, looking at Shelikof Strait, there could be some gusts upwards to 50 knots, hence supporting that suspended volcanic ash and Kodiak Island, especially the southwestern half. And then winds 35 knots offshore there through the North Pacific Western Gulf with waves running 10 feet. Northwesterly winds 20 to 25 knots on the Bering side, waves 5 to 7 feet. And across much of the region, we're looking at northwest to west winds for Wednesday coming down to 15 to 20 knots. Waves 5 to maybe 7 feet on the North Pacific side and around 4 feet on the Bering side up into Bristol Bay. For the Aleutian chain, generally easterly winds. The high pressure center will be located just to the south of St. Paul. So winds 15 to 25 knots maybe on the North Pacific side, waves only 3 to 4 feet on the Bering side, but maybe as much as 6 to 9 feet on the North Pacific side. We continue to see easterly flow there across the Aleutian chain around 20 knots or so, with the center of high pressure just southwest of St. Paul there, centered over the lower Bering. And then as we get up through the west and southwest coast, winds will turn more southwesterly from around St. Matthew on up into Norton Sound at 20 knots with waves 3 to 5 feet. Variable winds around 10 knots with just waves running a few feet in the vicinity of St. Paul and St. George. And for Wednesday, winds will be more westerly, around 20-25 knots there off the southwest coast, the lower Yukon Delta, and including St. Paul and especially the north side of Nunavik Island. The Arctic coast winds will be out of the west-southwest, 15 to 20 knots with ice in place. The lower Chukchi, though, winds accelerate southerly, 30 knots ahead of a trough. We're going to have snow showers moving in and then turning to the west at around 25 knots with colder air on Wednesday, so a rather raw day there through the Bering Strait and northwest coast. Low pressure late tonight, early on Tuesday will be there in the north central Gulf and continue to sit and spin before weakening later on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.